Welcome to Live With. I'm your host, Dave Palumbo, and we're here tonight with our guest of the evening, IFBB bodybuilding legend and owner of Labrada Nutrition, the one and only Lee Labrada. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, Lee, this is one of my bucket list interviews I always wanted to do. I followed your career probably from its beginning, as a fan, reading the bodybuilding magazines growing up. And, obviously you're still around. You have the Labrada Nutrition Company, and you've managed to stay relevant for over 30 years. Can you believe it's been 30 years since you turned pro at the NPC Nationals in 1985?
Yeah, I got to tell you, it really blew my mind. And I was backstage at the NPC Nationals standing next to Sergio Oliva Jr. before he went on and eventually won that show. And it blew my mind that on that same stage 30 years earlier, I had won the Nationals. I mean, it's just, it's amazing. And it's such a great feeling to still be out there with all those young people.
Now, Lee, back in 1985, when you won the middleweight class at the NPC Nationals and earned that IFBB Pro card, did you say to yourself, what the heck am I going to do now? Because, I mean, you were 176 pounds. Guys that were winning the Olympia, were way, way bigger than you, 60 pounds maybe bigger than you. I mean, what was your mindset when you got that pro card and moved on to the pro ranks?
Well, let me tell you this, Dave. We did not get our pro cards at the NPC Nationals. That was back then. We actually had to go on and compete at the IFBB Mr. Universe, the World Bodybuilding Championships, to get our pro card. So that year, I think that they gave out 4 pro cards, and pro cards weren't being given out left and right. And so I went on 2 weeks later to win my class at the IFBB Mr. Universe in Sweden, and won in the middleweight class, but they told me I would have won the overall as well, had there been an overall. And so that kind of got me thinking, I'm going to go ahead and set my sights on competing as a pro. And I did that the following year in June of 1986. But I will tell you this, being the smallest guy on stage can be an intimidating feeling. And all of a sudden I was up there with all of these guys that I had looked up to before, Tony Pearson, Barry DeMay, Robbie Robinson, all these guys that I had followed for years. And now I was thrown in the mix, and so imagine my surprise when I won my pro debut.
Night of Champions, 1986. You get up on stage and surprise and shock everyone by winning that. And that back in the day, people don't remember, the Night of Champions was really the number 2 show. You did the Olympia, and then you had the Night of Champions. So that was a huge win for you. There was no Arnold Classic back then. And, so that was like the prestige event. What did you weigh on stage at that show when you got that victory?
He was more surprised than I was. But it started sinking in that, that I had what it took to compete at that level. And so, it was just really a terrific experience. It was something that, that made me feel very humbled, that I could step up and compete at that level. Again, being up there with a lot of these guys that I respected so much. And to be considered a peer at that point, was really quite an accomplishment for me personally, and so I set my sights on the Mr. Olympia the following year.
What did you actually weigh? Do you remember back at that Night of Champions?
That Night of Champions, I weighed about 182 pounds, dripping wet.
you might have been the smallest winner of all time, or the lightest winner, I should say, not the smallest.
I'll put it to you this way. I was standing next to a 240-pound Barry DeMay and a 240-pound Eduardo Kawak, and there were some big boys there, and it was just something else, I'll tell you.
Lee, in 1989, that was your real breakout year. You placed second at the Olympia behind Lee Haney. You kind of put Rich Gaspari in your rearview mirror at that point. You pushed past him. And then you went on to win almost every European Grand Prix tour that year. You had to think, you know what? I've finally got validation. I've made it in a sense. What was your mindset back at that point in time?
Dave, I will tell you this, that it's something that I still to this day, it makes me feel very humbled that I was good enough to compete at that level, and I just felt this tremendous feeling of awe and respect, just being able to be up on the Mr. Olympia stage and to be competitive at that level, to consistently place in the top 4 for 7 consecutive years. I want to make mention that I never thought that Rich Gaspari was in my rearview mirror. Rich is a great competitor, and it was he was a guy that you knew if you took him for granted, and if you didn't show up quite in shape, that he was going to take you down. So a lot of respect there for Rich. And we had a great thing going back and forth on the wins at the Grand Prix level. Of course, the Holy Grail was beating Lee Haney, right? So Lee was king at the time, and arguably one of the greatest Mr. Olympias ever. I mean, who was greater than Lee Haney? Maybe Ronnie Coleman, but or at least his equal, right? And so, it was no bad thing, being in that company. These were just great competitors.
Lee, I didn't know Joe Weider, like personally, in his heyday, so to speak, but you had obviously a relationship with him. You represented his product line. You were, representing the Olympia. What was Joe Weider's advice or even feedback to you after that '89 Olympia and that sweep of the Grand Prix?
You know what? I will tell you this, Dave. Joe was always a father figure to all of us. He really cared about the bodybuilders. The bodybuilders that look back and talk about Joe in a disgruntled fashion is because those are bodybuilders that expected a handout. Joe was a businessman, so he never gave you a handout. He was like a football coach. He would hand you the football and say, "Run for the touchdown." You had to do the work. But I will tell you that to this day, I am ever grateful for what Joe and his brother Ben did for the sport and did for me personally. And so I always got great advice from Joe. He told me to just dig in, to get sharper, and focus, and that gave me a great deal of motivation.
Well, one of the most exciting, I think, points in your career, at least for me as a fan following, was the 1990 Mr. Olympia, where a lot of people thought you should have won that show, that you did beat Lee Haney that day, even though Lee Haney went home with that trophy and the first place. A lot of people called you the uncrowned Mr. Olympia after that. Talk to me about 1990 and what went on at that show and some of the back and forths that you had with Lee Haney there.
Well, I will tell you this. There was never, and even to this day, there was never any animosity between me and Lee Haney. He's just a great human being. Besides being one of the greatest bodybuilding champions of all time, he's just a great human being, and a great Christian brother. And so all the respect in the world. And, of course, I felt competitive. I wanted to win that show. But I will tell you that Lee Haney is no slouch. And that it was a great honor to be able to push him. Literally, I pushed him further than anybody ever pushed him, because in 1990, I was the only man in history that led Lee Haney coming out of a prejudging. Dorian Yates didn't do that. Nobody else that competed with him ever did that. And so, for a 180-pound guy to push the 250-pound king, that close, I felt that, that I had accomplished something, and again, to me, the greatest part of the Mr. Olympia experience was just going through that time, making history with all of these greats. It's just something that I'll treasure forever.
Lee, did Haney drive you crazy in the sense that, you have this guy, he's like an insurmountable, king on the throne, so to speak. He's so much bigger than you. I mean, he's literally almost, 70 pounds more than you on stage. And you keep butting up against this guy, and you know what? You show up. Oh, you're always Mr. Polished. I mean, I mean, they called you mass with class. I mean, you always had the perfect, detailed, tanned look. You never let any detail out in your prep. And then you would run up against guys like Haney, who would always kind of like leave the door open a little bit, but you never were able to slip in there. It had to drive you nuts.
I will tell you, it is frustrating to be that close and not be able to seize the golden ring, so to speak. But you have to put it in perspective, okay? Because, you are up against a contender that is 70 pounds bigger than you, 6 inches taller than you. What other sport do you compete against somebody that weighs 70 pounds more than you and is 6 inches taller, okay? And, you would never think a boxer, a middleweight boxer going up against a heavyweight boxer, that type of a thing. So What happened there it was that I realized that what I had to do was compete against myself, and not compete against Lee Haney. I had to compete and make myself a better Lee Labrada from year to year. So that is really how I got through it psychologically, and it helped to ease that frustration, to just focus on making progress, and becoming the best Lee Labrada that I could be, becoming one of the best bodybuilders of all time.
Lee, would you say that like Dexter Jackson is kind of like a modern day Lee Labrada nowadays?
I would say so. From the perspective that here's a guy that is, I want to say, what, 5'6" or 5'7", and he's competing against the giants. He won the Mr. Olympia. Great physique, great balance, very sharp, very dense physique. And I got to tell you, I am really, really impressed that he's doing this at his advanced age. I mean, he's like approaching middle 40s now, and and he's beating all these young guys.
You ever say, maybe I can make a comeback?
No, sir. At 55, what I am focused on now is helping the next generation. Speaking of which, I've worked with Sergio Oliva Jr. in the nationals. Now I've got my son Hunter, who's 23, and as I was telling you before the interview, Hunter is 5'9" and 245 pounds. We're going to diet him down to 224. He's going to be at the top of the heavyweights. He's going to be a big kid. He's going to be a contender. So I'm getting really excited about helping this next generation.
Has Hunter competed before?
This will be his first year. 2016 will be his breakout year.
Now, how does he wait so long before he gets on stage? Did you say to him, "Hey, don't compete till you're ready"?
That is exactly right. And really, he took a page out of my playbook, because I competed as a teenager at 17 and then at 18, and then I did not compete again until I was 22. And during that time, I used that time to put 40 pounds on my 5'6" frame. So that was a complete transformation. And so I told Hunter, these are your best growing years. Let's focus, on building size. Let's focus on building quality, so that when you do make the debut, that you're not just going out there and you're an also ran it. You're not placing. You want to go out there and you want to dominate. You want to make a statement.
Did he say to you, Lee, "Hey, Dad, I want to be a bodybuilder," or did he just kind of get immersed in the industry because of the fact that you still have the nutrition company and you still go to shows? How did his desire to compete come about?
That's a good question, Dave. I think it evolved because I was always just dad to my boys. I've got 3 boys. Hunter's the oldest, 23. I never was one of these fathers that pushed bodybuilding on them. We do have a gym at home. My 3-car garage is essentially just a gym with professional equipment in it. And so he would see me working out. He would see my wife working out. He played all of the sports, baseball, football. Football became his love. In fact, he had a football scholarship to a Division II school in the Northeast. But it occurred to him at some point that he loved working out more than he loved playing football or any other sport, at which point he turned to me and said, "Dad, I want to be a competitive bodybuilder."
Wow, that had to be a tough pill for you to swallow, because, we talked about this. I talked about this with Sergio Oliva Jr., that his dad wanted him to have nothing to do with bodybuilding. What was your thought about that? I know we all as fathers want to, let our kids do what they're passionate about. But did you have any reticence about maybe having them get into the industry?
Of course you do, because, the times have changed, and the guys are so much bigger, and to compete at that level, there's, certain things that as a father, I prefer, for him not to be involved in. At the same time, I recognize, by his passion that he wants to compete at a professional level, and who am I to stop him? So it was one of those things where I'm going to do it with you or I'm going to do it without you. And of course, I'm going to be in his corner all the way. I love bodybuilding, and I think that that bodybuilding is the best sport in the world. I think it's fantastic, and so I want him to enjoy that, but I want him to enjoy the process of bodybuilding, and not to get so hung up on whether he wins that contest or this contest, because the greatest joy that we get from bodybuilding is just seeing our bodies change, and having the pride and being able to, to almost create a mini evolution of sorts in our body, to take something and to make it even greater, and to develop it fully. That's the enjoyment right there. And that's what I wanted him to experience.
Well, I mean, that's obviously a great, I guess, help for him to have his dad, who's a Hall of Fame bodybuilder, in his corner. Do you find that you're using a similar diet on him that you used on yourself, or has your nutritional ideas evolved as well over the last 30 years?
Hunter has a dietary program that's very similar to mine. So we eat 6 times a day. He'll consume about 300 grams of protein every day. So that's chicken and fish at every meal, along with 14 ounces of complex carbohydrate like sweet potatoes. So I mean, and I'll tell you, this kid's discipline is amazing. And it's like, wow. It's like chip off the old block, because that was one of the things that really helped me was, the conditioning. And to get that kind of conditioning, you got to have discipline. People ask me, how do you get into such great shape? And I go, it's pretty simple. You got to eat like a dog. Eat like a dog. What's that mean? I go, dogs eat the same thing every day. If the owners care about them, they feed them a high quality food, but they eat the same thing every day, and they eat a measured amount of it. So high quality food in a measured amount every day leads to a great physique. You have to have the discipline. You got to be able to push away from the stuff that everybody else is eating, and so, that's tough, especially for a young person to do, but he's got that kind of discipline.
Well, he definitely learned it from his dad, that's for sure. Lee, back when you were in your heyday and the 90s started rolling around, mid-90s, and we started getting the Dorian Yates, the Kevin Lavronis, the Mike Matarazzos, the mass monsters, as we called them back in the 90s. What did that do to your mindset at that point? Did that change like where you felt that the sport was going? And did that change, your desire to continue competing?
Yes, most definitely. And listen, here's the thing. Our sport is going to develop. Okay, I mean, it'd be silly to think that the sport is going to be in the same place today that it was 30 or 40 years ago. So the sports have to develop. Football players become bigger and faster, bodybuilders become bigger and more muscular, so forth, so on. So I knew it was changing, and I came to the realization that I had outgrown the sport. Personally, I had accomplished what I wanted to do, but the sport had outgrown me. So they were going towards a different kind of physique, a larger type of physique, and I walked away from the sport, not disgruntled, not disaffected, and not bitter. And on the contrary, I walked away from the sport very grateful for having had the experience, for having had the love of my fans, and I just can't tell you how great it was, so it's just a fantastic life experience for me.
Lee, what really impressed me was even at the end of your career, when you started, I think 95 might have been your last year, a lot of people don't realize you were probably the best you had ever been. I mean, you were the biggest you were the hardest. I thought you had the greatest physique you had ever achieved was when you quit. And obviously the guys just got super big, but you're one of the few guys that quit while you were on top, like Lee Haney did.
Yes, I had the good fortune of placing in the top 7 consecutive times in the Mr. Olympia, and of course I won many pro shows, and the lowest placing I ever took as a pro was 5th place, and it was my very last competition, which was the Arnold Classic in Columbus. And so to me that was the writing on the wall. It's time to move on. I have outgrown the sport. I feel like I'm climbing Mount Everest and then lowering the rope and climbing it again. And I was ready to move on to other things. I was ready to help people and to give back to the sport and to share my knowledge, and so I was just ready to turn a page at that point.
Now, Lee, back in the early 90s, the company Metrics kind of was born through I guess you could say, the vision of Dr. Scott Connolly and Bill Phillips. And you were really the first athlete that they kind of used to sell the line, so to speak. And, through the rumor mill, I don't know if this is true now, I heard you were making very good money back then. Was that really your first big break in terms of financially?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, the metrics deal was a great deal for all of us, and really it was foreshadowing, I believe, for the supplement industry today. From the standpoint that metrics was one of the very first high tech products to ever come out in the supplement industry. It wasn't an also ran product. It was an expensive product, but it was an efficacious product, and it had a lot of science behind it. So I was glad to be associated with it. And we did very, very well with it because the consumers recognized how high quality of a product it was. So yeah, it was all the rage at the time.
Did you use that, I guess, sponsorship, or I don't even know how they were paying you, royalties, whatever, to then start Labrada Nutrition?
Absolutely, yeah, that's very observant on your part, but I did quite well with metrics. In fact, I was one of the first three people there. It was myself, Scott Connolly, Bill Phillips, and Jeff Everson. Four people, and so we just started it, from the ground up, and it took off. And then, of course, everybody kind of went their separate ways. Connolly kept metrics. Bill Phillips went on to launch EAS. Who could forget EAS? And and then Jeff Everson went on to do some of his own things with his magazine and so forth. And so I launched Labrada Nutrition, yeah, with my life savings basically. And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy.
Well, I remember when you first launched it. Wasn't it like a multi-level marketing company initially?
Initially, Dave, I thought to myself, I'm going to go outside of the bodybuilding community and I'm going to sell vitamins and I'm going to sell fat burners and things that are of interest to the average person, And so I explored using multi-level marketing to do that. I found out after a year that I did not like multi-level marketing for various reasons, and that I was going to get back to my roots, which is to say bodybuilding. And so we basically relaunched the company a year later as Labrada Nutrition, which is what it is today. And the past is just history. I mean, it's just it's gone great.
Has the supplement industry, in your mind, evolved over the course of the last 25 years or so, from when you launched Labrada till today? Because obviously the industry is completely different now.
Some things have changed quite a bit. Other things have not changed enough. Okay, so let's talk about the things that have changed quite a bit. The things that have changed quite a bit is that the technology now and the array of supplements that are available is just incredible. The quality of the supplements, it's amazing. All of the ingredients that are out there now that have science behind them. There's never been a better time to use supplements, and there's never been a worse time to use supplements, because companies still, unfortunately, adulterate their supplements. We had the protein spiking scandal, a couple of years ago, where protein wasn't meeting label claim and that type of a thing. And so that's a very scary thing for the average supplement user, because you want to make sure that what you're paying for is what you're getting, So it's a saying that we have built my company on. If it's on the label, it's in the product. That's not anything new for us. For the last 20 years, from the time that I launched the company, 20 years, we have been lab assaying, third-party lab assaying all our products, make sure that they meet label claim. And I will tell you that at first I drove our manufacturers nuts, because I would send back entire truckload shipments. If they showed up, we tested them, and they didn't meet label claim, they were gone. They were going back, because my consumer was only going to get the best, and they still only get the best. I still spend, I spend close to $500,000 a year on lab testing alone, just making sure that my products meet label claim. So that is our big thing. We want to provide honest products for people so that they get what they pay for.
I'll tell you right on the air, and so that the whole world can hear this, because I love your Lean Body RTD, the pre-made protein shake. It is, number one, the best tasting one out there, and it really fits the macronutrient profiles that I really espouse to my athletes, which is high protein, moderate fat, very low carb. I don't know how you did it, but you made a fantastic tasting product that's just super high quality. I don't think that any other RTD out there is even close to yours.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that a lot, especially coming from somebody of your stature, and with as many supplements as you've tried. That's quite a compliment. We're very proud of it. we feel that we hit the target right on the mark. Zero sugar, high protein. It has prebiotics in it, so it's good for your intestinal system. I mean, it's just a fantastic product. It really is.
And I can't imagine it's a cheap product to make. So it's always harder to sell something that doesn't have a high profit margin. But I know you really truly believe in quality, similar to the way I do.
For absorbing that. And yes, truly, that is our philosophy. Is the customer first. We want to make sure that our products truly are the highest quality.
How did you meet Sergio Oliva Jr. and what made you decide to kind of put some sponsorship money behind this kid and believe in him enough to make him, the IFBB pro he is today?
Well, here's what I want to make sure that I address this. I didn't make Sergio Oliva an IFBB pro. Sergio Jr. made Sergio a IFBB pro. He has earned this. He has worked extraordinarily hard in order to win the national title. I will tell you this, I have always had the greatest respect for his family, starting with the relationship that I had with his dad. I knew his father, and I met Sergio a few years ago. I was actually with my son Hunter at the Arnold Classic, and we spotted each other in the auditorium, and I went over and introduced myself, and he said, "Of course I know who you are," right off the bat. We became friends instantly, and so our families became friends. We had Sergio out to visit us here in Houston. He's come to my home. He has shared dinners with us. I mean, literally, he's like a son to me. And so I can't say enough good things about this young man. Just has a great future ahead of him. It's got a lot of energy, and just a great potential, really, really great potential. So we got to know each other, and we started working together over the last couple of years. We really got serious about this. He really buckled down. To his credit, we've provided him with the supplements and the, and advice. And of course, I was always willing to give him advice when he wanted to hear it. And it's just been a great relationship. We're just really super excited for him.
Speaking about his dad, Sergio Sr., what was your relationship with him? And a lot of people, he's kind of an enigma because a lot of people don't know much about him. He never really was interviewed that much. I don't know that much about him. Can you give us any insights or maybe some stories that you might have remembered that would maybe help paint a better picture of him?
I can tell you that he was Cuban, so he's not half bad. Of course, I'm Cuban myself. They say that it's something in our water. I don't know, but I will tell you this: is that Cuba has produced some pretty darn good bodybuilding champions, if I say so myself. Well, kidding aside, I met Sergio Sr. at the 1984 Olympia, and it was a fortuitous meeting because that was his comeback year, and that was the year that he brought Sergio Jr. up on the stage, and he holds him up kind of like the Lion King, up on stage and says, "This is the next myth." And so, we would run into each other at shows, and there was a great deal of respect there. And of course, when I met his son, I looked at him, I go, "This kid is a chip off the old block." I mean, his genetics are just off the chart.
Yeah. Can Sergio Jr. Achieve a level of Olympia caliber physique that his dad did, in your estimation?
I think that Sergio Jr. has the raw, God-given talent that it will take for him to be competitive and to possibly even win the Mr. Olympia. Okay, but Sergio is going to have to work harder than he's ever worked in his life. He's going to have to do all of the right things, and Sergio will make or break Sergio.
Very good answer. Lee, what would you say, what percentage is mental in bodybuilding? What percentage of being a great champion comes from being a strong person mentally? Because we see a lot of great talent that never won the Olympia, from the Flex Wheelers to the Kevin Lavronis to the Kai Greens. What do you think is missing, or what do you think is the mental component percentage that you would say that it takes to be a champion?
Tremendous. I mean, it's like where your mind goes, your body's going to follow. Where your mind goes, your body is going to follow. And you have to have this undying belief in your ability. And, I will tell you in my own case, I'm like a bumblebee. I'm not supposed to be able to fly. How's a 180-pound bodybuilder supposed to stand next to a 240-pound bodybuilder? That's not possible. And so, but I didn't think of myself as a small guy. When I got up on stage, I felt that I was the biggest guy on the stage. And so, and that's not an arrogance thing, not at all. That is a belief that comes in your psyche, and just becomes embedded in your psyche, and it's something that manifests itself outside in the real world. I'm a big believer in that. That as you think, that so shall you be. And you're going to attract negative or positive depending on what you focus on. So I chose to focus on the ultimate result, which was to achieve the greatest physique possible and let nobody tell me that I could do otherwise. But I will tell you that I saw a lot of guys fall short of that, or not have the discipline or the belief in themselves to get there.
Good answer. Very good answer. I have to agree with you. I believe that how you think really translates into what you become. And I think a lot of bodybuilders forget that part of the equation. Let's talk a little bit about this new division that's debuting here in 2016, Classic Men's Physique. Kind of an amalgamation between bodybuilding and men's physique. It will be basically bodybuilding limited, your weight limited by your height. Do you think this is good for the sport of bodybuilding, and will this nurture a different looking athlete in the future?
Yes to all of the above. I think it's absolutely fantastic for our sport, because what we want to do as bodybuilders is to invite more people into our sport. Listen, there's always going to be the Mr. Olympia. There's always going to be that, pushing that frontier, pushing that line, to ever greater levels of development and things, to see how far the human body can go. We're always going to have that. However, at the same time, I think that it is absolutely in our best interest as a sport to welcome newcomers and to bring people in that have a different ideal in their mind of what a physique should be like. And I got to tell you, I share that as well, because I believe that a physique should be balanced and should have harmony. And so I welcome this classic bodybuilding category. It is the only category that I know of where there's actually going to be a weight limit for the height of the individual. You don't even have that in the men's physique. So the classic bodybuilding is I think going to be fantastic for the sport. It's going to open up the sport to a lot more individuals to compete, and with that, greater interest from the public, and it's just going to be great for everybody.
I agree 100%. I've been calling for that and saying that this was a need we had. A lot of people say, oh, the shows take too long. We don't need any more divisions. But let's face it, there's a lot of women's divisions. There was only 2 men's divisions. And I think this third one will really, bridge the gap between the two and create a much more mainstream appealing physique. Now, Lee, I have one more question. If I didn't ask you this, my fans would have my head before we go. The mustache, the classic Lee Labrada mustache. What happened to it? How come you decided to shave it at some point?
It's interesting. I clipped that mustache in 1990, and I just kept it off for the longest time, and then, my wife happens to like facial hair. I've been married to Robin for 30 years, and she's just fantastic. And so, she happens to like a little bit of facial hair on me. So that's why I have that, but not the old heavy mustache.
Mustache, yeah. I thought maybe you did that because of like Joe Weider. I thought you wanted to have be the mini Joe Weider a little bit, there.
No. Interestingly enough, I mean that you got to remember that's back in the late '80s and early '90s, and I happened to like that look at the time, and so I wore it. So it's just it was no big deal.
Known for that mustache the same way Samir Bannout was, and I saw Samir once with it shaved. I think he did a show, one of Master's shows, and I said, Samir, you got to have that mustache. That is your signature,
Right. What happened to the mustache? Yeah, it's too funny. Yeah, it's interesting, But I just so you know, I did try to keep that same look throughout my bodybuilding career. Because I felt that I was a brand, and that I needed to differentiate myself from everybody else. If everybody else was going to be an orange, I needed to be an apple. That's how I was going to stand out, and then I wasn't going to deviate from that. So I worked very hard on making sure that all the details were in place. the everything, from the conditioning to the posing trunks to the tan, everything.
Lee, speaking of brands, the Labrada brand has been around for over 20 years now, like you said. Where do you see the future of the company? What new products can we expect from Labrada Nutrition in 2016?
Dave, the bottom line is this. What we want to do is to create products that help people to reach their goals. That's why we're in business. We're in business to help people to reach their physical ideals. So we focus a lot on the fundamentals, the building blocks, which is to say the lean body ready to drink shakes, the branch chain amino acids. We have probably the best tasting BCAA powder on the market. We have the amino thrust powder. We've got so many. We got Supercharge, which is the one of the only that I know pre-workouts that have active ingredients, 10 active ingredients in effective dosages, so that you don't have to take 10 different products. And the greatest thing about all these products, they meet label claim, they can be trusted completely. So at the end of the day, that's why we're in business. We want to do things that help people to reach their goals.
All right, last question, even though I said last question about 5 minutes ago. Who will win the Mr. Olympia in 2016? Any predictions from Lee Labrada?
It's hard to say. Phil Heath is very strong, great physique, great guy. I will tell you that there's a lot of guys that are coming up and on his heels. So it's going to be really interesting. If I had to guess, I would say Phil again. But I tell you, he's got guys like Sean Roden that are pushing him really hard. Of course, you can't ever rule out the likes of Dexter Jackson and guys like that. I mean, there's a lot of great physiques out there. There really is.
Your opinion for Kai Green to sit out the 2015 Olympia at this stage of his career?
Let me say this. I'm sure that Kai has personal reasons for doing what he did. Kai has always been extremely nice to me. I really like him. He's a very nice individual. If you were to ask me if I would have sat out at that point in my career, I probably would not have. But then again, I don't know all of the details, what's going on in his personal life and what his personal goals are.
I want to just thank you for all your great information you gave us and all the background stories that maybe a lot of the current crop of bodybuilders who watch this show might not have known. Like I said, I grew up as one of your biggest fans, and it's a great pleasure for me to be able to interview you on Live With.
Dave, thank you so much. You're really a class act. Thanks again.
All right, that will take us to the end of another episode of Live With. I'm Dave Palumbo. We'll see you next time.